The power of personas in business insight and innovation. What's your story? I have to admit that when I was first introduced to personas, I was a little skeptical. What would the value be of creating fictional characters, fictional people to use for your business? How could that possibly add value? As I learned more about personas and then introduced persona frameworks into several business situations, I've learned that there really is a lot of value to them. And that's the purpose of our discussion today, is really understand that the power that these personas can provide to you for business insights and innovation. Let's start with what is a persona. I'm sure many of you have had looming deadlines, wishing that you had a better handle on your customers' points of view as you're trying to make some tough decisions. What are they thinking? What are they saying? What are they feeling? I'm sure you already have all kinds of statistics about your customers at your fingertips. Reams of diagnostics that can help you make a decision. But can you really put yourself in your customer's shoes? I mean, really put yourself in your customer's shoes to where you know and understand who that customer is and how they're going to react and what they're going to do as a part of the messages that you're going to send or the new products that you're going to develop. Probably not. So what is a persona? A persona is a realistic and detailed representation of a customer. It is meant to be thought of as someone who actually exists, someone who is created with rigor and exactness and brought to life in such a way that you can make decisions based on this person. In other words, a persona is a real person that you have created, a real person who is using the goods and services that you have in place so that you can more fully understand how they think, why they act the way they do, how they're going to act and react to different messages that you send, different product ideas that you create. It's really an effective tool for business application and really trying to understand who your customers are. What a persona is not, however, is a stereotype. They're not an Italian baker. They are not a cop with a jelly donut. They're not a role. There's not a construction persona. There's not a doctor persona. That's not the way it works. That would imply that everyone in those roles behaves and acts the exact same way, which we know is not true. And it's not a customer segmentation. Personas are about the person, not the segment. A segment can be a category, a grouping, not a person, which is really what we're trying to get at when we talk about personas. The power of empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It is a powerful tool for business. Empathy can enhance your ability to receive and process information, help you arrive at more creative solutions, break down barriers between you and your customer, create solutions that have greater staying power, and make you more agile, rapid response to changes in customers and competition. Personas are a tool that can help us build empathy for your customers and for the goods and services that you are selling. How can personas help inform and transform your business? There are a number of ways. By helping you to understand a more intimate profile of your target. Again, getting back to what a persona is. It's a real person. Empathy gives you a better understanding of who that real person is, a more intimate understanding of who that person is. When you know someone and can put yourself in their shoes, you are better able to think the way that they do and react the way that they might. Empathy can help a business align and share a vision. Personas provide a tool for that kind of alignment. When you have your persona environment and you are sharing that throughout the organization, everyone understands who your customers are, who they are as the real people they're supposed to be. Marketing messaging, how to tell the story. It's much easier to communicate with and message with people that you know. When you can put yourself in their shoes and have that empathy for your customers, your messaging is going to be more effective because you better understand who they are and what they're likely to respond to. Moreover, you are better able to know where to tell the story and how to spend your marketing dollars. You know who your customers as people, that they're more likely to be watching The Walking Dead than Days of Our Lives. You know how to spend those dollars and to do it in an effective way because you know first how to message and then where to spend the dollars to get that message across because you understand your customers as the people that they are. And finally, personas are provide a foundational understanding and integration. And that's part of what empathy helps to bring to you, is that foundational understanding. By putting yourself in their shoes, you know how they're going to react. And by socializing that and sharing that throughout an organization, you are developing that empathy, that foundational knowledge to be able to more effectively market the goods and services that you're trying to. So what's the process? How do you create these types of persona environments that we're talking about? Our approach at KS&R is really holistic, anthropologic approach. It's built around 3 pillars: developing hypotheses about what you think that environment should be based on all of the information that you have at your disposal today. Then taking an introspective view of who those customers are, letting them tell you how to speak to them, why to speak to them, where to speak to them. And then finally, from an immersion standpoint, to really immerse yourselves as a business into what that customer's life is like, to more effectively understand who they are and why they are. So let's start with a little more about the hypothesis pillar. From our standpoint, hypotheses are really built around 3 different areas of learning. Discovery, where we're trying to understand what is already in place, what you have already learned about your customers from a business standpoint. Stakeholder input, what does your organization, the decision makers within your company, how do they view the market? How do they view the customer base? And what are their thoughts from that standpoint? And then social media. What can you scrape from the internet through social media tools in order to more effectively understand this marketplace, this customer environment? Through these 3 areas of learning, we are able to create what we call distinguishing characteristics. By distinguishing characteristics, we're talking about those dimensions that your customers segment off of, how they differ from each other, how they distinguish one another. For example, there are those people who require someone to show them, someone to teach them how to use a product or how to use technology. And then there are those people who may be more self-sufficient, those who prefer to discover how to use something on their own. There are those folks who want a better balance in their work and personal lives. And then there are those who blur the lines. So those are just examples of the types of distinguishing characteristics that you're looking to build through the persona process. The hypothesis pillar really helps us to build those initial thoughts around these distinguishing characteristics for how the market, so to speak, splits and separates into different groupings. Before we even meet with our targeted audience here, we like to ask them to do a little pre-work, a little introspection that we can then use to help us understand who they are as people. A couple of examples of what this pre-work or introspection might include. Self-portrait, video submission, asking each of these customers to tell us a little bit about what their workday looks like, what they would change about their job, what makes them happy, what words and phrases would others use to describe them, what's their pet peeve, those types of things, to have them tell us in kind of a self-diary video how they respond and how they react to these different questions, and what are the building blocks of their own personal lives, the things that make them happy, the things that make them sad. Another type of introspective activity that we would ask people to do might be, taking pictures, a photo submission, using mobile devices, take pictures throughout your day. What are those things in your environment? They could be personal, they could be work, where you are using your mobile device as an example, so that the person takes the time over a couple of days to take pictures of where they are using their mobile device. Again, these activities are built specifically for who your audience is. So these examples may or may not be relevant for your specific set of situations. That being said, this gives a good flavor for the types of activities that we would ask people to do from an introspection standpoint, so that we can better understand who they are, what drives them, what motivates them. The last pillar, as we've discussed, is immersion. And this is really the bedrock of our learning activities. And there are two steps to immersion. Observation, where you are touring their work area, trying to understand what their specific duties might be, how their roles and responsibilities differ from other players involved, and then asking them to show you, to demonstrate some of the tools that they're using for their job, how they interact with people, how they interact with technology, how usable that technology might be for their specific work responsibilities. And then in addition to observation, we want to spend a little time in one-on-one discussion or interviewing with the targeted audiences here. This in-depth in-person discussion is loosely structured to allow for a lot of in-depth probing. It hits on both business as well as personal types of information, really trying to add the detail and the insight about who they are as a person, looking at the person holistically, not just as someone who works, not just as someone who doesn't work, but looking at the whole day, looking at the whole person, so that we can really get into the weeds and understand better who they are and what motivates them. Collectively, these three pillars really help us to understand who the customers are. Creating the persona itself is really more of an art than science, and it's really the art of finding patterns and stories in the data. And I always laugh at this picture with all the Post-its on the whiteboard, but that really is what it takes in order to create personas that can be meaningful for your business, and really looking through the stories of the people that you've spoken with, the stories of your customers, and trying to map together and distinguish between them, what are those characteristics that are most meaningful. So what are the benefits of this holistic anthropological approach to persona development that we've been talking about, including our three pillars of hypotheses, introspection, and immersion? Really, the benefits focus on creating a comprehensive, highly accurate assessment of the data, highly accurate assessment of who your customers are, helping us to generate empathy, and doing the work in a way that allows us to more effectively generate empathy allowing users, your business teams to adopt the personas frame as their own. In other words, to be able to put yourself into that customer's shoes. Another benefit is that it helps to speed the application of the persona to business issues. We're doing this in a way that really creates a lot of foundational understanding about who your customers are as people. From that information, we can speed up the application of the persona for the business issues that matter most to you. In addition, by doing this work, we are able to help facilitate buy-in throughout the organization more effectively. And then ultimately, by having these three pillars in place and taking a holistic approach, we are more effectively able to overcome barriers to socialization because we are creating a memorable and manageable cast of characters through the persona environment. These cast of characters will be people that your business team can have a relationship with and can understand more thoroughly the things that motivate them, the things that make them do what they do, what their frustrations are, and who they are as a person, which, as we've said from the beginning, is what we're trying to do when we're creating a persona. I'd like to walk you through a brief business-to-business case study. I have to admit that this case study is really a combination of two different assignments that we had. The reason for combining them is wanting to make sure that certain points that applied for each of them are illustrated in the work that we're trying to do. So from a scene setting standpoint, we're talking about a global manufacturer of mobile phones and navigation services. They had conducted a customer segmentation based on their own customers. They understand through that segmentation that level of involvement, attitudes towards mobile devices, and the complexity of the experience all help segment different customer groups. But the business team was still asking, who are my customers? They did not really have that deeper understanding they needed to build a marketing and product development strategy for business growth. In other words, they didn't have the empathy that they needed with their customer base. So we set out to do persona research among their targeted audience. Our scope was global. We went to 10 different markets in order to conduct the persona research. A key point here to note is that because we are taking this holistic anthropological approach to personas, we have to also understand what the cultural limitations are when we're doing this on a global basis. There are limitations. There are things that you can't do in Germany that you could do in the U.S. There are issues with security in China and Korea that you don't have when you're doing the work in Canada. So we adjusted our scope and we adjusted our plan to be able to allow us to do as much as we could in each of the markets that we wanted to go to, at the same time being respectful of the cultural differences and the needs associated and the limitations that might be placed on what we could do there. From a hypothesis standpoint, we reviewed secondary and primary research across all of the markets that we went to. We completed 15 to 20 stakeholder interviews with key decision makers around the world. We conducted some social media exchanges to really understand some of the sentiments going on in this marketplace. And we developed a set of hypotheses, including distinguishing characteristics that we had discussed earlier. I wanted to just take a moment to say a brief word about social media and the role of social media in hypothesis building. Social media is the largest source of unsolicited consumer and business opinions ever. You can really gauge sentiments at a point in time as well as over time and by specific locations or areas by scraping through social media. The tools that are in place can really add much needed insight and understanding when it comes to building the hypotheses around what distinguishes customer groupings and how to build those distinguishing characteristics in a more effective way. From an introspection standpoint, we asked all of the participants in the study to complete 10 to 15 pre-work activities. These activities included video, picture, text. It was really a good opportunity for us to have introspection from the people that we were talking with. All activities were stored in an interactive sortable portal by market and by respondent type. We had over 1,000 submissions associated with this task, and it really allowed us to get a good understanding by having the right set of activities across the board of who each of these participants were as people, as real people who were using the goods and services that we were trying to better understand. And then finally, the immersion and the in-depth interviews that we completed here. We did about 8 to 10 immersion interviews per market. Participants were shadowed during their workday. We also had about a 90-minute one-on-one interview with them where we would ask them about their thoughts, their feelings, how they started their day, how they ended their day, what their workday looked like. We would ask them to show us the technologies they would use and to show us how they were using the mobile devices that they had in play. We would ask them to do special tasks, like maybe use their mobile device to find an address and then to drive us there, since one of our objectives here was understanding personas in a mobile environment and a navigation environment. So giving them tasks while we are there to observe that would allow them to use these types of navigation tools and for us to go along for the ride. From an analysis standpoint, it is really a rigorous analysis that has to be done to ensure that you are getting the persona environment right. To start off with, we create a participant level working summary where we take into account the introspection submissions, the on-site videos and transcripts from our immersion interviews, our notes from observation, and we really set up that one-by-one profile of each of the participants that we've spoken with. Then we use a 2-by-2 comparison method where we compare all of the summaries to one another and start identifying those distinguishing characteristics, those things that separate one customer from the next. And then we evaluate the distinguishing characteristics across all of the participants. We compare them back to the hypotheses we've made, and we start adjusting as needed. One of the benefits of having gone through the hypothesis phase is that we know going into it the types of things we're looking for, and then we can use the inputs from the research itself to guide us as we make the adjustments that can make those distinguishing characteristics more effective. And then finally, we build the personas. We group each participant based on the distinguishing characteristics that we've created. We identify those patterns based on groupings. We know any regional or cultural issues that may come into play, and we establish the personas in a narrative for each of the personas themselves. It is important to note, however, that we have to continually view results through both a cultural lens and a personal lens to ensure that we are capturing the whole person, not just part of the person, the whole person. The results, we created a persona environment, a 6-person framework. We created a detailed playbook for each of the personas. In the playbook, we had a snapshot, a profile, an ecosystem of understanding about who they interact with, both personally and at work, what a day in their life looked like, motivators and frustrations, distinguishing characteristics. And then we took our persona framework, in this case, Tomas, Shin, Betty, Sue, Armando, and Wendy. We took them on a socialization bus, so to speak, and trying to get the business teams engaged with these 6 people who helped categorize and help build a framework of understanding a real person environment, so to speak, for the business to better understand who their customers were. So just going through a little bit of the detail in terms of what those playbooks look like and how you go about introducing personas themselves, let's take a minute to meet Tomas. Tomas wants to own the latest technology now. His name is Tomas the Techie. There are a lot of folks who say, do you need the tagline with the name when you're doing personas? In this case, the client wanted it because they felt that it was important to be able to be more descriptive than just having the name Tomas would be. It is really a personal decision for the business, whatever you think would be more effective for your organization. And so we go through here a number of things that help profile who Tomas is. A senior IT project manager, he's in Cologne, he's single, no kids. He manages several multi-million-dollar projects for a global IT company. He's responsible for developing and implementing solutions to drive business improvements and cost savings. His employment history is that he's been with this company since he got his MBA and has worked his way up from a computer programmer to part of the management team now. From a decision-making standpoint, he's around a queen in terms of his level of authority when it comes to decision-making, meaning that he's not the sole decision-maker and that there are those higher in the organization who could have more decision-making authority, but he's still pretty high up in the organization when it comes to the types of decisions that our clients are looking to be made. A little more guidance around who Tomas is. His values, he values innovation, he values brands, he's a rational guy. He feels lost if he doesn't have his mobile phone with him. He's motivated by many of these same things, including innovation, proficiency, complexity, risk, and excellence. And then as you look at what he's likely to be doing, he loves soccer. He'll watch he'll watch MTV, look through PC Magazine. Those are the kinds of things that make him the person that he is. Points from a business standpoint to refer to see how he's influenced. A little more about Tomas. Let's take a walk through his day. At 6 a.m. he wakes up, he checks his mobile phone for emails, responds to any client requests that might have come overnight. By 8:30, he's meeting with his IT programmers and web designers to discuss their ongoing projects. At 10, he's meeting with vendors to receive feedback on work in progress. Are they meeting their deadlines? What is at risk for the project itself? At 11:30, he's troubleshooting some design problems that have come up. At 1:30, he's picking up a Subway sandwich to eat at his desk while finishing up that program code. And then by 7, he's relaxing with friends, but he will be on call for system emergencies. So that's what a typical day for Tomas looks like. The experiences that he wants with the folks he's dealing with, he wants technology innovations that will make his life easier and more efficient. He wants as many features as possible. User friendliness is less important. He really wants the ability to do, regardless of how many features it takes. And from a personal standpoint, he really wants a premium mobile entertainment experience for both gaming and music, something that he can engage with, something that he can relax with. So that's a day in the life for Tomas. I think you can see through our review here of the playbook and then a day in the life here for Tomas, that there's a richness that comes with the information that you can get from personas, a richness that is not necessarily apparent by looking through reams and reams of statistical data. That richness really allows you to create that empathy and help your organization to better know and better understand who its customers are, who these personas are. One of the most important parts of creating any persona environment is getting it socialized. Here you've gone and you've spent a lot of man hours, a lot of time, and a lot of investment dollars to create a persona environment for your organization. But if you cannot effectively communicate it to that organization, all of that investment may be for naught. So some of the tricks of the trade, so to speak, that we've come up with in terms of effective ways for socializing personas, one idea is to create a game. Some of the tools we've used from a game creation standpoint, one idea has been a match game, where we create different desktops, so to speak, for the personas that we are socializing. And then we have the participants, the people who are in the organization, do a match game between the desktops and each of the personas so that they can tell us which best describes the desktop that you would expect from persona A or persona B, or what do you think Tomas's desktop would look like, and gives them a chance to match these to what Tomas would be. Another type of game would be around a design challenge. So asking your business associates to design maybe a mobile device for Tomas. What would Tomas's mobile device look like? And while they are creating that mobile device, why they need this invention, what circumstances would it be used, what are the must-have features and the nice-to-have features, and ways to make it more functional and desirable. So really making it, again, more of a game for your colleagues to introduce them and help socialize the personas themselves. Another tool for socialization is creating a storyboard, where you really have a step-by-step view, many times including video, that walks through the different parts of who Tomas is. How he identifies himself, how he works with others, what are the things that motivate him and make him into the person that he is. Another tool is creating an avatar. Avatars are really high-end graphical representations of the persona, an animated speaking character. Hi, I'm Tomas. What would you like to know about me? And giving the user the chance to click on those areas that are of most interest to them about Tomas, and doing this in a meaningful way. Avatars can be very powerful tools. I'm not going to lie, they're also very expensive tools, but they can be attention-getting, and they can really help create that emotional engagement by having essentially Tomas telling you who he is and about his day, about his interests, about his frustrations, and so on. Lastly, a workshop or gallery walk. This is a very common approach that we've used, particularly with larger audiences, where we take the time to really introduce each of the personas to the group, give a high-level overview of each, get folks out of their chairs, maybe doing one of the games that I described earlier to engage with each of the personas, and then possibly rotating around the room with different workstations or galleries associated with each of the personas to provide a greater background and a greater understanding for who each of the members of the persona environment is. Lastly, I wanted to spend just a minute about using personas to help drive innovation and some of the tools that we have seen our clients use when it comes to innovation and a persona environment. You really need to make the personas part of your team. And that can include two different ways, through persona-based reviews, where your team engages in role-playing and you're assuming the attitudes and viewpoints and language of the personas in a discussion, or scenario-based reviews, where you walk through the customer experience of a persona. What is easy for that person? What is hard? What is helpful? How do you feel about the changes being made? What are the best and worst parts of the experience? But really, again, putting yourself in those personas' shoes. Plan, develop, and design specifically to meet the needs and the wants of personas. We talked about the game earlier from a design standpoint, but it really is important that you are putting on that persona's hat, wearing that persona's shoes when you are planning, developing, and designing the new ideas that you have in order to meet the needs and the wants of the personas themselves. Another good way to use personas to drive innovation is to audit your existing solutions. Go through your features, go through your channels, go through your content. Make sure that you align that with the personas in mind. Who is this content speaking to? How could it more effectively speak to each of the personas in the environment? And then, another way for personas to help drive innovation is to really help guide some of your resource allocation opportunities, looking through the persona's habits, their behaviors, knowing that you're allocating resources in a way that is meaningful for the person who is your customer and the types of things that they are likely to be doing. Thank you so much for your time today in going through these learnings from a persona standpoint. We really appreciate your joining us for this conversation and welcome any questions that you might have as you think through some of the topics we've discussed here and how they apply or could potentially be used by you and your business. Take care.